hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the car for episode 136 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this early Saturday evening. Well, actually not that early. It's after 7:30 here in New York. But if you're checking out this episode on the YouTube channel or enjoying the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platform such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today is Warren Beatty's 87th birthday. And Beatty is very much a unicorn in the sense that his career is at least on par, if not greater than, again, this is all subjective, than his peers. So basically it's like Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, there's that level. They're born 1930. And then you have the Al Pacino, Robert De Niro that are born in like early to mid 40s. But there are four titans of film acting, some of whom done more in the case of Warren Beatty and Robert Redford, but four titans of the movie business who were born within a year and a half of one another. Beatty, Redford, Hoffman, and Nicholson. And to people under 30 for sure, and probably even under 40, Warren Beatty is the most elusive and obscure, unless you knew to look for him, because he has been mostly retired for at least 2 decades. And the last movie he made, which was in 2016, where it was kind of a romantic comedy called Rules Don't Apply, where he played Howard Hughes. I guess a different cinematic iteration than what DiCaprio played with Scorsese in The Aviator. But Warren Beatty is mostly and has mostly been retired for quite some time. And he didn't work as frequently as most of the big stars. And this is something that he and Redford shared. Redford, who also was a director and a producer, and somebody who was lauded for a lot more than just being a film actor. Not that there's anything wrong with just being a film actor, but Warren Beatty has been nominated for 14 Academy Awards in his career, which is an absolutely staggering. It's impossible to even conceive of that, especially given the fact that most of what he achieved happened up to and including 1991, when he wasn't that old. He was 53. And that's when he got the last of his Oscar nominations. All of those nominations as actor, as producer, as director, as writer. That's where you get all of the nominations. And I'm not going to go movie to movie and all that kind of stuff with Beatty's career, but he is somebody who, if you're not familiar, if you know Jack, no pun intended, but if you're familiar with Nicholson, who I absolutely love, and who is certainly one of the acting goats, all four of those guys, well, maybe not Redford. Redford was more of a movie star and a fantastic filmmaker. But Hoffman, Beatty, and Jack, all in the same ballpark as far as age. Now, Hoffman's still working, and he's working feverishly, which is, to me, incredible. Jack is pretty much, there were people that were worried about his health, and he showed up at a Lakers game looking great and shaking hands with LeBron and everybody. But Jack's done. He's retired, and Beatty has made no indication that he is not retired. But he's somebody who, if you're not familiar, he is worth looking up, Googling, because you're going to find some stuff you won't believe, because you see him now, and I can't even, it's horrible to imagine Warren Beatty looked upon as this doddering old man. Warren Beatty was probably the nicest womanizer in the history of womanizers, because he hooked up with so many different women in Hollywood over a period of like at least 3 decades. And the only person who seemed to be salty was Carly Simon. It's pretty sure that her song "You're So Vain" was about Warren Beatty. But Beatty, aside from being very, very intelligent, he's one of those people who just seem to get along with everybody. And there were women that should have been mad at him that, nah, we're good. And in the movie Shampoo, I think he got with every one of the leading ladies, with the exception of Carrie Fisher. In that movie, Goldie, Lee Grant, who was the other actress there? Julie Christie. Wow, my God, I almost forgot Julie Christie. But Beatty was just one of those people who had a certain kind of personal magic in that he got along with everybody. He was considered brilliant, but he was brilliant in an approachable way. He was not brilliant in a kind of vacant, mad genius sort of way. And everybody who worked with him, they used to say the same about Redford. That Redford was a guy who would often hem and haw and end up not doing a project, but rarely burned bridges, and wasn't known as a contentious kind of a personality, as Beatty was not really known as a contentious kind of a personality. But Warren Beatty is a guy who should be studied and kind of not slept on for how important he was and has been to the development of movies and the development of what is now the Hollywood process, and a kind of like he was part of the new Hollywood movement in the late 60s. The film Bonnie and Clyde, which I'm not necessarily that big of a fan of, but it was a groundbreaking film. It was a movie that something happened that had never happened before. It was a film that was released, and the old guard of critics, and I'm going to throw some ridiculous names at you, guys like Bosley Crowther was a big movie critic of the New York Times, and Bosley Crowther thought the film was offensive and horrible and disgusting. And Warren Beatty, who actually was involved in the production, he didn't just show up and act in that movie. He called bullshit, and he managed to convince the studio, this movie deserves a second look. The old guard is wrong. This is a great film. And they brought the movie out again, and the newer generation of critics were dazzled. And that ended up being an enormous hit, a huge film for Gene Hackman as well as Warren and Faye Dunaway. The thing with Beatty is he's like his pal Redford and like Nicholson and like Hoffman, they were not afraid to take chances and make movies where they played characters who were not necessarily all good. They were heels and often did not win at the end. Either were killed or severely compromised or some combination of that. And Beatty was, in this case, no pun intended, he had balls of steel. He was not afraid to fail. He was not afraid to risk big and take shots and take chances. And so, like I've talked about on the channel, how the 1970s were an extraordinary time for film in this country, where you had these intensely personal films from filmmakers who were geniuses, who were earlier masters of the form, like Kubrick, like Altman, like Arthur Penn. And Beatty worked with Penn, and he worked with Altman, and guys like John Schlesinger, and Alan J. Pakula, another one he worked with in the Parallax View. And after the ultimate success of Bonnie and Clyde, Beatty made some very interesting films, but the ones I want to pinpoint, and most specifically what I believe to be his best movie and his best performance, it's one of the great films. It's the movie he did in 91 when he was already crazy to think that he was coming to the end as far as being a leading man, but he didn't feel the need to just put out product just because. You know, he did the Dick Tracy movie with Madonna and the now unfortunately late, Glenn Headley and Al Pacino and Dustin Hoffman. It was an incredible, gorgeous film, perfectly cast, and it didn't do as well. And that was 1990. It didn't do as well as people expected. It didn't work that much in the 80s. He and Dustin made the movie Ishtar, which was a massive bomb. It's one of the kind of biggest bombs in the history of Hollywood when you take that talent and Elaine May, an extraordinary screenwriter, just completely flopped. It was a terrible movie that did terribly at the box office, like a Howard the Duck. And I know Howard the Duck has its defenders. Oh, it's underappreciated. Bullshit. It's terrible. You can like it, but it's not. Hudson Hawk, I would agree, is underappreciated. Howard the Duck is just bad. But Beatty, who had not worked that steadily, and I love his movie that he did, Heaven Can Wait, in the late 70s, with pretending to be the quarterback of Los Angeles Rams. He made a lot of really, quality films. Didn't work a ton. He was always working, but there were a lot of projects that fell through, as we see this can happen. And it happened with Redford also. But Beatty did Dick Tracy with Madonna, and he still had this kind of Lothario reputation. And he and Madonna got together during the making of Dick Tracy. And Dick Tracy is a movie, if you haven't seen it, I'm pretty sure that's a DC Comics, even though Dick Tracy is not a superhero. He's a detective. The movie was a hit, but not as big a hit as they were hoping, and it didn't end up getting the sequel that people desperately wanted. And sometimes that's just the way that it goes in Hollywood. If Dick Tracy had been a bigger hit, if there had been a greater imprint, was Bugsy going to be made at the same time? I don't know. But the 1991 film, Bugsy, directed by Barry Levinson, who worked with Redford in one of my absolute favorite movies ever, The Natural. It's in my top 10. It's almost in my top 5. That's how much I love the movie The Natural. But Bugsy it's a masterpiece. It had the unfortunate bad luck of running up against the runaway freight train that year that was Silence of the Lambs at the Oscars. And Bugsy was nominated for either 10 or 11 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Warren Beatty. And I believe that it is Beatty's best film acting, his best performance by a wide margin, certainly that I've seen. He is incredible as the real-life Jewish gangster, Benjamin Siegel, who was partners with Meyer Lansky, played in the movie magnificently by Sir Ben Kingsley, who himself was nominated for supporting actor. And I should point out the personal connection. My mom's father, the iconic, legendary Isidore Baron Breitkopf, worked for Meyer Lansky. He was allegedly Meyer Lansky's driver, his primary driver. The mugshot of my grandfather with a shiner, I think he was doing more than driving limos. I think he was busting people's heads open when they didn't pay what they owed. I think that he was a collector, but that's beside the point. The movie Bugsy is an extraordinary film, and Beatty's performance is so beautifully calibrated because the real Ben Siegel wanted to be an actor. He was a gangster, a murderer who really wanted to be a star. He wanted to be a movie star. That was his goal in life, was to be a movie star. And he was friends with people like George Raft, who was a star of the day. And Joe Mantegna is great as George Raft in this movie. And Benjamin Siegel, or Bugsy, the title of the film, was a family man. He had a dutiful wife who adored him, and he was running around on her with who knows how many women. And we don't know how many people he killed. He was not a nice guy. But as presented in the movie, he's fascinating because he can be a clown, he's funny, but that can turn on a dime. And Beatty captures every aspect of this guy. We don't know if he was really like this, but the performance is so good, you almost forget you're watching an actor. It feels like you're seeing this multifaceted, interesting, fucked up, scary, funny guy. And we remember Tommy in Goodfellas, that he was scary as fuck and he was funny. And this is in a similar vein, but the real Benjamin Siegel, and as presented, Warren Beatty as Bugsy, is much more charming and has it in him to not be crazy. Beatty, unfortunately, despite this extraordinary performance, and just in brief, Bugsy is an absolute must-see movie. If you haven't, I think it's free on Paramount Plus. It is a brilliant film. But the real Benjamin Siegel, if you ever wonder how Las Vegas became Las Vegas, how did Las Vegas become this place with all of these casino palaces and resorts? He's the answer to the question. It was Benjamin Siegel who came up with the bright idea, why don't we build palaces out here in the desert? They thought he was fucking crazy. And how many trailblazers, how many generational talents or generational concept people are thought to be insane? And Benjamin Siegel, this guy's fucking crazy. Who the hell's ever going to want to come out here to the middle of the fucking desert? He's nuts. He wasn't nuts. He was a genius. He was way ahead of his time. And so that's what the movie essentially gets into, that he gets this idea, we can do something here, and we can have endless streams of income if we do this right. So Warren Beatty, who gave this phenomenal, multifaceted performance, ran up against Anthony Hopkins, who's brilliant, don't get me wrong, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs, that's an all-time performance. You could argue as a supporting performance. Just as I've argued on the channel, I love Jeffrey Rush, brilliant, great actor. He's phenomenal in Shine. It's a supporting performance. Tom Cruise should have won Best Actor for Jerry Maguire. If I got a vote, which I didn't. And if I had a vote today, which I still don't. Cruise, that was Cruise's Oscar. Help me, help you, help me, help you. Show me the money! Warren Beatty is in virtually every scene of Bugsy and never breaks character, never calls attention to himself, never seems like a movie star reciting dialogue. He seems like a real guy going through the madness of that story in real time. Whereas his future bride, the woman who, cliche city, tamed the wild beast that was Warren Beatty, Annette Bening, who was his co-star in that film. He and Beatty and Madonna, who had been together for about a year, they had broken up. Annette Bening reads her lines like an actress reading lines in a movie, and her character, Virginia Hill, is an actress, so it kind of makes sense. Annette Bening is an extremely talented performer, always has been, but sometimes I feel like her performances have not been in sync with the rest of the cast, as was the case with American Beauty, a movie that I don't unabashedly love. It has great elements. It doesn't really work for me. And part of it is that Annette was the only one who played it as though it was a comedy. That was the irony. And I always felt that her performance, because she's reading her lines as if she's in a comedy, her performance kind of throws the movie a little bit out of whack. But that's neither here nor there. Warren Beatty should have won, in my opinion, the Academy Award for Best Actor for what he did. And unfortunately, if Anthony Hopkins had been deemed, well, this is more of a supporting performance of Hannibal Lecter, if that was the way that they decided to go, I believe Beatty would have won the Best Actor award. Now, the one Oscar that he did win is for a film that, shame on me, that I have not seen, called Reds, which was a movie also with his buddy Jack Nicholson was in it, playing the playwright, the real life playwright, Eugene O'Neill. And it was a movie about the early part of the 20th century and communism in America and all this stuff. And it's a great epic, like Lawrence of Arabia style epic. I've never seen it. I remember my parents went to see it. I don't think my dad particularly liked it that much. I think my mom was falling asleep. But Beatty won his Oscar for Best Director for that film. And that's an important Oscars year for me, because my all-time favorite movie, Chariots of Fire, ended up winning Best Picture. And the fact that Beatty took home Director and didn't win Best Picture, well, that was a little bit not expected, because as it happened that night, if you watch the YouTube for this, when Beatty wins Best Director, the idea is, well, it's going to win Best Picture. And people probably wouldn't have been too happy about that, because movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, On Golden Pond, and Chariots of Fire had a lot of people who really wanted for them to win. And it would not have been a popular choice. But Beatty himself was beloved and very popular. And he was in his early to mid 40s, 43 or so at the time, 43, 44. But Beatty ended up not winning the Oscar for his incredible performance as Bugsy Siegel, Benjamin Siegel. Didn't like being called Bugsy. It's ironic they call the movie Bugsy, because at various points in the film, he's threatening to crack people's head open for daring to call him Bugsy. He did not win Best Actor. Anthony Hopkins took the prize, and I had seen Bugsy in theaters. I had already watched. Now, Silence of the Lambs was not released late in the year. It was not a late year release. It was released early in the year. I had seen Silence of the Lambs and Bugsy, which my father took me to because he was really excited to see it, and we saw Bugsy in theaters probably about 2.5 months before the Oscars. So those Oscars, I had seen JFK. Like, I was actually really prepared for those Oscars. I was pissed off that Terminator 2, how the fuck did James Cameron not get nominated for director? Are you fucking kidding me? He should have won Best Director, period, end, let alone get nominated. What can I tell you? There are a lot of Oscars. Like, the Oscars are all political. Sometimes they just make the wrong fucking decision. And James Cameron not even getting a nomination for Terminator 2 is, to me, as outrageous as any screaming and yelling we could do about how did this person not win this in what year. Beatty not winning Best Actor is very unfortunate. I love Anthony Hopkins, Sir Anthony, or Sir Tony. Tom Hanks always calls him Sir Tony. And there's just something so cute about the fact, Sir Tony. Beatty slowed down after having made those 2 movies and appeared in the Madonna documentary Truth or Dare in that time frame. That documentary was shot during Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour, and Warren Beatty was with her, literally, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It was not a secret. Everybody knew they were together. It wasn't under the table. And Warren Beatty in the movie Truth or Dare, the summer 1990, or maybe just before, as Madonna was on her now iconic Blonde Ambition tour, he was with her and he's in the movie, and you can tell he's not entirely comfortable, but he also doesn't want to screw things up for her, and he's always going to be polite. And there's a moment in the movie where I believe it was the filmmaker, Alec Kashishian, who later did a movie that a lot of Gen Xers loved called With Honors, with a very young Brendan Fraser and Joe Pesci, among others. Very, very solid film, a lot of fun and with a heart, but beside the point. In the Truth or Dare documentary, Warren Beatty is wearing sunglasses and Madonna is preparing for, to do a performance. I don't know if she was in New York, but it was somewhere, there was going to be a big performance. And there was an idea that Madonna wanted the cameras to follow her around all the time. That's what it appeared to be like. And I don't know if it was Alec, the filmmaker himself, or somebody made a comment or asked a question. Do you think, meaning Madonna, she always wants to have the camera on, or something like that? And Warren Beatty said, I don't think she wants to live off camera. Now, Warren Beatty didn't know that the future of entertainment in some ways was going to be centered on reality TV, where they got the camera on you. You want to go take a crap, maybe we'll turn it off. You want to have sex? Oh yeah, we can watch that, or maybe we won't. That's extra. But Beatty's comment, I don't think she wants to live off camera. Wow. In a decades pre-Kardashians world, he knew what the fuck he was talking about. He knew where things were going. That was not an accident. Yeah, it was in the moment. He just happened to say that. But that was a very prescient comment, because it happened to be exactly dead on accurate for where society ultimately was headed. I mean, the Truman Show was still 7 years away. So after Bugsy, and it was such a success, the critics loved it, and there were plenty of people who, when they talk, what are the greatest, crime movies, it's in the top 3. It's easily, for me, in the top 3. You want to go Goodfellas, Godfather, Bugsy? No problem. Because Bugsy shows you the hierarchy of the Jewish mob, the highest levels of the Jewish mob. And it's believable in the way, well, this is how they make the money here and there, and they could loan this, and then it's really well done. And the performances, Harvey Keitel as Mickey Cohen is incredible. And Sir Ben Kingsley, as I said, amazing as Grandpa Barron's old boss, Meyer Lansky. So Beatty and Annette Bening got together, they got married, and God bless him, 33 years later, they're still together. And as he's obviously a lot older than her, but they seem as if they're happy. And, they raised a son, and he slowed down. The two of them made a movie. They did a movie, Love Affair, which was essentially a remake of the old Affair to Remember, and it has similar elements to Sleepless in Seattle, but technically it's a remake of the Cary Grant, Deborah Carr, and Affair to Remember. It's not good. It's not good. And Beatty managed to get Katharine Hepburn, who he adored. He managed to get her to play a small cameo, and he said it took her, he was joking around, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in roses and gifts to get her to do this. That's how desperately he wanted her in this movie. The movie was not good. And so he started to back away, and he did the movie Bulworth with Halle Berry, which is a very, very unusual pairing of, he's probably about 30 years older than her at the time. The movie is good. It was ballsy. And at the time, wow, like he went into areas in that movie you didn't expect. There was a lot of racial politics stuff and a lot of, left versus right kind of stuff, and rich white guys versus the inner. There's a lot in that movie where you watch it now, you say, geez, I can't believe they made this movie more than a quarter of a century ago. It was not that successful at the box office. And Beatty then backed away a little more, and he did a film called Town and Country, I believe Diane Keaton, among others, in the movie. And that film took years. It took years to be, to be produced not to be produced. It took years to be released. And so he really didn't do much after that. It would have had to have been a project that he was really desperate to do and really want to do. And I guess he just didn't find anything that was so pressing. Sometimes you just had enough. Cary Grant wasn't that old. He was still in his 60s when he walked away. Sean Connery was 71 going on 72 when he made his last movie. And I guess he just had enough. And other than this film that I was mentioning where he played Howard Hughes and not a big part in Rules Don't Apply, then that's it. And even, Redford kept working, and Redford, played the kind of villainous character, Sterling, I guess, was a congressman, in the, MCU. Not Sterling. I don't remember what his name was, but he played a United States congressman in a couple of the MCU movies. And so he was working steadily, and Hoffman kept threatening to retire, but never actually did. I don't think Beatty has actually come out and made an announcement, I'm retiring, but he's 87 now. He's had enough. He worked his tail off. He made so many great movies, was involved in so many difficult, fraught productions with all sorts of issues. Decided he wanted to do something else. Well, take it easy. You don't have to work till you die. You're allowed to enjoy your life, enjoy your health if you still have it, enjoy your family if you're fortunate. And in his case, my feeling was he felt incredibly lucky and blessed to have met Annette Bening at that particular time in his life. And man, 33 years. Showbiz marriages normally don't last anywhere near that long. And there they are, still going strong, still looking great together. And she's still doing great work herself. She's a fantastic actress, even if I think that some of her performances were not modulated in accordance with the rest of the cast. She's fucking great. But as I say, Warren Beatty, an extraordinary talent in every possible way, a great producer, a great director, and a top-tier GOAT of film acting. Somebody who figured out the form and understood how to give specific performances in keeping, in accordance, in line with the rest of the cast. He was very good at picking up on the energy and using that in his acting technique in various films. And you'll see a lot of different performances. If you look at the comedic nature of Heaven Can Wait versus some of the heavier moments in movies like Bugsy, you will see a master of the craft. Warren Beatty, 87 years old today. Happy birthday to one of the all-time legends and most important people to ever work in the movie business. This has been episode 136 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on yet another car ride, out of the studio. Woo. But if you've caught this episode on the YouTube channel, have enjoyed the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 137, most likely in the studio, real soon. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Peace.